Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Rutt Writer, and I am now working on my 50th upload. Boy, I sure have come a long way this year. Alright, this week's movie we're going to be taking a look back is the 1970 movie titled The Great White Hope. It is a sports biopic romantic drama that runs for an hour and 43 minutes long. It is directed by Martin Ritt, and it is loosely based on a play by Howard Sackler. Sackler also wrote the script for this movie. The cinematography was done by Burnett Gaffey. The editing was done by William Reynolds, and the music score was done by Lionel Newman. And it stars James Earl Jones, Jane Alexander, Chester Morris, Hal Holbrook, B. Richards, and Moses Gunn. What did I think about this movie? James Earl Jones steps into the metaphorical Hollywood ring, playing the first African American to break the color barrier as Jack Jefferson, based on the real-life boxer Jack Johnson. Not only that, but he also goes on to become the first African American to win the World Heavyweight Champion in boxing. After winning the championship, the boxing community was deeply outraged by such events that Jefferson becomes an instant target of racism as scouts were splurging around looking for their next great white hope. And if that isn't enough, the outrage is turned up another notch in both the white and the black community, as Jefferson is currently in a relationship with a very beautiful and very Caucasian Eleanor Bachman, played by Jane Alexander. And while Jefferson keeps knocking down all those tough guys to their feet, these detractors use underhanded tactics to eventually finally bring him down. Under the direction of Martin Ritt, who has directed such classics as HUD and The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and it was based on a play by Howard Sackler, who also wrote 2 Jaws scripts. The movie is one to likely holds one interest, but it still doesn't measure up to the long-running and very successful play. The primary struggle this movie has is the standard cliched look at the world of boxing during the time period, the early 1910s, and the somewhat theatrical performance by James Earl Jones. The story kind of feels too narrow-thin, and Jones's performance is just way too powerful. I'll probably give him a break that this was his first starring role. It wasn't his debut. His debut was the 1964 movie Dr. Strangelove, but he's only playing like a very small supporting role. But the film itself was very lopsided and awkward in its delivery. I think that, this whole transformation from play to motion picture, some films work very well successfully. This one, unfortunately, not so much. With that said, like I said before, James Earl Jones gives an amazing performance, and his powerful bass voice he possesses will deliver the message across from here to Kingdom Come. Is it possible that they refrained from a cool cat like Sidney Poitier character to the more loud, eternally defensive character to add more tension for the character and the predominantly bigoted Caucasian characters in this movie? It also seems interesting that even through the trials and tribulations, Jefferson still has an eternal, perpetual smile on his face, even though his smile is obviously superficial. Jones was excellent in his Oscar-nominated role, and his grimmest expression may be like the whole tears of a clown defiance, like the smile on his face is only just a mask to fool the public. Because underneath that smile, we see an angered interior. Aside from Jones's powerful performance, Jane Alexander was wonderful as she reprises her Broadway performance as the troubled, caught-in-the-middle Caucasian love interest to Jack. We certainly feel her pain, as biracial relationships were not tolerated in that time period, let alone when this film was released in 1970 for that matter. But her anguish will likely melt your heartstrings in the right place. It's just unfortunate that she never rose further in the film history as other divas in the 60s and 70s, because she really epitomized a troubled lady caught in the middle, feeling alienated, isolated, and just completely lost. And even James Earl Jones's character, and even this Jack Jefferson character, does not really come across as being entirely a nice guy. I mean, when he had his victory celebration in the ring, and after, the victory celebration, he starts questioning his black community members, like, what is this championship going to do with you? I'm the one who stepped into the ring. You didn't step into the ring, I did. So what have you got to be proud of? Sometimes he had this kind of over-the-top condescension. And a lot of times, he was like very defensive. And I don't blame him entirely for being defensive. I mean, look at all the crap that the guy has to go through. I mean, all these scouting agents and the press, the predominantly Caucasian cast, not the Caucasian characters. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. The characters depicted in this movie, well, they're all just a bunch of bigoted assholes, and will do anything they can to dethrone Mr. Jefferson, to throw him off guard, just so that they can restore pride in the field of boxing by taking this championship belt off of a black guy in search of their next great white hope. One of the big hiccups I had about this movie too is that the film kind of loses its panache once Jefferson is forced to leave the United States for, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Cuba, and the issues start to drag on for too long, making the movie not intended for cinema. Yes, we know these racist agents and the press are trying to do everything to dethrone this poor misfortunate guy who just wants to have a moment of happiness, only to be severely condemned because he's a black guy in an all-white sport at the time, and that he's also in a biracial relationship with a Caucasian woman. Yes, we get the idea. You don't have to just keep constantly rubbing it in our faces. But unfortunately, that's what the movie tends to do, and it tends to go on for too long. I'm not saying anything about the movie's length, an hour and 43 minutes. That's pretty much about how long the movie should be. But the message it comes across is continual and surreptitious. There's no need for that. We just maybe I was just wanted to see some good old school classic boxing matches, but you don't really see too many of that. This movie is too politically based, and also the thing is that there was too much emphasis on racism in early 20th century sports. I was hoping that this would be more like a life story on the man who broke the color barrier in boxing. We do get the feeling that yes, he was suppressed by the media and these talent agents, but it goes on for too long, and that's kind of like what really drains the movie. I mean, I got nothing against the performers. I mean, James Earl Jones and Jane Alexander, they were really, really up there. And, James Earl Jones, this was his first starring role, and he just played his role off quite naturally. Jane Alexander was also surprisingly quite convincing. I had kind of my doubts about her, not because of anything bad, but because, she is most of her career was spent in the theater. Now, the theater and being in a motion picture, the acting is completely different. But she also played the role quite naturally. Sure, she was kind of usurped by James Earl Jones, but James Earl Jones is just a very, very powerful performer. And of course he's going to upstage the rest of the other cast members. I mean, I think the rest of the other cast members, white or black, seem to come across as being very underdeveloped. And even sometimes I even feel that the character Jack Jefferson himself was underdeveloped. I mean, I wanted to see like what he was like in his younger days, or how he got into boxing. You never get that. This was all mostly just a political statement dealing with race issues in the early 20th century, and that's the only feeling I kind of get in this movie. I mean, it's a nice rich piece of history, don't get me wrong, but it just goes on for too long, and the message is too repetitive. But in all fairness, the Great White Hopes, set the bar for, other boxing movies of this caliber, like The Hurricane or Alley. The boxing scenes, though there were very few of them, feel very real and very authentic. I mean, I kind of liked, the boxing gloves that were used in this movie were very convincing. They weren't like this really thick stuff, they were actually kind of hard, and and you can actually feel the knuckles. You can actually see the blood between Jefferson and his opponent. And it actually did have some pretty good exciting action in that ring. But there was very few boxing. Like I said, it was more political than any other kind of aspect in this movie. That was the weight that carried this movie, was the political statement. There wasn't very much sport in this movie. But at least, the boxing scenes were actually quite convincing, and the choreography was quite sublime. And the old school rules in the boxing ring were also quite authentic. So I gotta give kudos to that. But the issues on racism in movies have been going on for years, and it's something that I've seen 1,000 times, before and after. But at the end, the powerful message left me with a lump in my throat. It was really that powerful. And I think, James Earl Jones has truly pulled it off. Even though the movie was kind of lopsided and not very settling at times, it still grabs your attention and delivers a very powerful punch. I recommend it mostly to the performances and the characters, especially from James Earl Jones and Jane Alexander, and the supporting cast also turned in some pretty good performances too, like Hal Holbrook, Moses Gunn, Robert Webber, B. Richards, and R.G. Armstrong. So if you have a chance to watch this movie, please feel free, and you'll be intrigued by it. If you want to see it for free, it's on YouTube. So, get a chance while you can. I guess this kind of ends my writer review. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to my channel. Want to write back to me? Do so. Be kind, be courteous, and I will be back with another review. Till next time, keep watching those movies. Goodbye.